Most kids' furniture looks more or less the same, so we came up with this stylish CNC joint that we used when designing a furniture set for this young lady. The joinery we designed might appear to be complex, but it's relatively simple. It's a mortise and tenon joint just with an extended tenon with a hole in the middle and an added circular cutout in the mortise component. Whenever we come up with a new concept like this, we have to test it out before implementing it in a project. So I load an offcut piece on the CNC router and cut two parts, the tenon piece and the mortise component. Right away it's clear this type of joinery will require extreme precision when CNCing the parts for the kids' furniture set. Since it has a smaller glue surface than the regular mortise and tenon joint, any deviations in the cut precision will affect the strength of the joint. Therefore, we might have to reinforce the joinery with a handful of screws. Also, the joint will take more time to make and apply the finish to than it would to a regular mortise and tenon joint. But apart from the obvious downsides, it looks playful and interesting, and therefore suitable for kids' furniture. When we have a basic understanding of the new joint, I can start designing the simplest of all the kids' furniture pieces, the chair. At first, I thought the new joinery would be enough to liven up the furniture, and I could use simple shapes for the parts. However, it doesn't look good, so I have to exaggerate the shapes of each component so they match the joinery shape. Soon I have completed the design for the kids' chair and can work on the desk, shelf, book display and bed designs. Again, I make sure the component contours work well with the appearance of the joinery and that each new furniture piece feels like a part of the set. After I have the kids' furniture designed, we can load the workpiece onto the CNC. Considering the odd shapes of the parts, the CNC machine might be the only tool suitable for making this project. As always, I start by cutting the joint mortises and making the cutouts inside the component before cutting the outlines of the part. Since I'm not using the support tabs, I have to watch the CNC while it's making the joinery cuts. Especially when it's cutting the circular tenon cutouts, they tend to fly across the CNC table. To make the best of the material, I combine parts from different furniture pieces into one layout. Considering the plywood thickness can vary from sheet to sheet and it can affect the tightness of the joinery, this might not be the best idea. However, we have just enough material to make all the necessary parts, so it has to be done this way. Since the side components of the bed were too big to fit on the CNC's work surface, the only way to make them was by using the tiling approach. So I divide the project into 3 different sections and make all the necessary cuts one section at a time. If you would like to learn how we set up the tiling CNC operations and how you can maximize the potential of your CNC, I recommend you watch this video where we go through the tiling approach step by step. Anyway, after we have CNC'd all the necessary parts, it's time to trim the component edges. First I start with the small parts that can be easily managed on the router table. After all the small part edges are rounded nicely, I take the palm router from the CNC and go over all the large component edges, from the circular cutouts in the tenons to the component outlines. The parts for the kids' furniture have to be smooth and splinter free, so I have to be careful not to miss any of the cutouts. Since there are a lot of them, I might miss some. However, I will notice that while sanding. Speaking of which, I use a sandpaper flap disc that can be attached to the cordless drill. It speeds up the process a lot since I don't have to sand 202 holes by hand. Yep, I counted exactly how many cutout holes this project has. That's how much I enjoy sanding. While having the best time of my life, I'm thinking of more ways to enhance our new mortise and tenon joint. Adding different colors to the circular cutouts seemed like a good idea. It would add even more playfulness to the furniture, which is a good thing considering it's made for a kid. After sanding the circular cutouts, I pour red paint into the paint tray and get to work. At first, painting the holes might appear to be random. However, I have numbered the cutout holes so the colors are spread across the furniture evenly. At this point, I haven't sanded the large surfaces and I don't have to worry about the paint covering more than the cutouts. We will be able to sand it off later. After painting all the red colored holes, I pour yellow paint in a different tray, take the parts from the paint drying rack and paint more cutout holes. Watching how the paint livens up the parts is very satisfying, but having only 2 different colors isn't enough, so I pour green paint in the last tray and cutout after cutout paint the remaining holes until the paint drying rack is stacked with colorful parts. A couple of hours later, I can start sanding the large surfaces with an orbital sander with 120 grit sandpaper. My main concern now is sanding off the spilled over paint from earlier, and it takes only a couple of passes before the joints look nice and clean. Surprisingly, removing the paint spillage made the sanding process more bearable, at least when working with the orbital sander. It was a different story when sanding the plywood edges. The odd shape of the component means we can't clamp the parts together and sand all of them at the same time as we have done in previous projects, and we have to get all the edges sanded by hand. Needless to say, it took quite some time. But after the sanding is complete, we can remove the wood dust from the parts. To do so, I'm wiping all the components with a damp cloth and placing the parts on paint drying rack to dry. It's important to remove all the dust off the parts to ensure the best quality finish. Speaking of which, for this project we are using water-based lacquer, so after pouring it into the paint tray, we can start applying the finish to the components. As always, I finish the edges of the components before working on the larger surfaces. The unique component shape doesn't make the finishing easy, and as predicted, the tenon joint does take more attention. Every time I have to paint or apply lacquer to my projects, I'm thinking about spray booth options. Now I haven't found a good solution that would work for our garage workshop, but perhaps I haven't looked hard enough. If you have any good recommendations for DIY spray booth, I'm all ears. Having one would speed up finishing when working on a larger project like this one. After all the parts are made, I can pack them for safe transportation. When wrapping the project in plastic film, the finish must have dried. Otherwise, when unpacking, you might realize that the parts have stuck together. In our case, that wasn't an issue. After unpacking the chair components, I can start assembling the parts. The joint fits just right. However, I might have to reinforce them with a couple of screws later. Anyway, it isn't long till we have the chair assembled. At this point, my friend's daughter is curious but only shyly approaches the new furniture in her room. But soon after I had finished assembling the shelf for her posh toy collection, she grew more confident and was helping me to unpack the components and was carefully watching as I assembled her new desk. While the young lady is having a break at her new desk, I can continue by assembling the book display. After inserting the shelf floor components in the back panels, I can attach the assemblies to the display side component and install the bottom cover. Since we used CNC joinery when making the parts, assembling is super simple and doesn't take long. Soon we have the book display ready, and my friend's daughter seems happy about the option to display her favorite books. As the final task, we have to assemble the bed, so one by one I insert the slats in the side component mortises and attach the other side component. To finish the bed, I only need to attach the footboard and the headboard. And just like that, we have gone from a new joint concept to having it implemented in a kid's furniture set. The result looks nice, especially where the painted joint cutout contrast with each other, and the unusual shape of each component makes it perfect for a kid's room. Now it's time to insert the mattress into the bed frame and let my friend's daughter take a nap and enjoy her new furniture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.